Inspire Washington acknowledges that we and our cultural partners statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. We pay respect to their elders past and present. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where all of our cultural partners live and work. Currently, there are 42 tribes, 29 of which are federally recognized, that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington state. Some of these nations and confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands, and Inspire Washington recognizes all of them. Inspire Washington expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers and culture bearers of the region. As a cultural sector, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching art, heritage, natural science, and providing cultural programming. We pledge that our relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. I'm Madeline Dalton. I'm the outreach coordinator for Inspire Washington, and I am from Newcastle, Washington, which is within the land of the Duwamish tribe in the interconnected lands of the Coast Salish people. Who are we? We're Inspire Washington. If you've never met us before, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Our mission is to strengthen communities and nurture the human spirit by improving access to science, heritage, and arts programming through advocacy, professional development, education, and coalition building. This is coalition building and education and advocacy all at once in action. You are all advocates, whether you've signed up already for AHS Week or you plan to do so and you want to learn a little bit more. You are an advocate for culture. Welcome. We're so thrilled to have you here. We advocate in many, many different ways at many levels of government, but you are likely here because you're interested in AHS Week, which is Arts, Heritage, and Science Week. That's our annual event every February where we go to Olympia or virtual Olympia if you're zooming in. And we talk to our lawmakers about what matters to us, about all the different bills, budget provisos, et cetera, that are on the docket that pertain to the science, heritage, and arts sector in Washington state. In terms of who we are as a team, I'm the outreach coordinator, so I am here to do administrative work, but also to organize all of you advocates. We have 49 different teams, one for every single legislative district in the state, and I am coordinating all of you. We also have some wonderful volunteer leads, district leaders who are in charge of their one district, and regional captains who oversee a handful of districts in their region that I communicate with, and they're also going to be people that you meet throughout this process. We also, I don't know if Jessie's logged on yet. I think she has. We also have Jessie in the house. She's our deputy director, if you want to say hi and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see you all today. My name is Jessie Wasson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director for Inspire Washington. I have a new puppy who needs to go to the bathroom, so I'll be right back.
No worries. Thanks, Jessie. And then I don't think Manny's here today, but some of you probably know Manny. He is our wonderful executive director. So who do we support? We support science, heritage, and arts. What does that mean? First of all, our science partners. That consists of zoos, aquariums, fish hatcheries, nature conservancies, innovation centers, anyone who has something to share with the public, especially engaging students around natural sciences, biology, the world around us, that is in the science category. Then we have heritage. That's going to be historical and cultural heritage sites, museums, humanities organizations, or cultural heritage festivals. And then we have the arts, which is pretty much exactly what you think it is, but not just visual and performing. We also include things like spoken word, film, literature, etc. Go ahead and pop in the chat just to introduce yourself, who you are, where you come from, and which, if you are a science, heritage, or arts partner, so you can meet each other while we wrap up this presentation. I'll be quick, I promise, and then we're gonna pass it over to our guest speaker. All right, so what is AHS Week? AHS Week is our annual state level advocacy event, as I mentioned. What we do is we have hundreds of people that come to the state capitol to talk to their lawmakers, and it happens every February during the first week of February. This is a hybrid event, so you can participate either virtually, in person, or both. Most people actually do both. We'll take virtual meetings with lawmakers all throughout the week of the 2nd through the 6th. And then on the 4th, we'll actually go to Olympia in person to meet with our lawmakers. Very shortly, your district leaders will start sending emails to their lawmakers to set up those meetings for you. So you'll hear from them very soon about where you need to be at what time. And we're going to be doing lots of meeting prep and things like that throughout January. But one of the biggest parts of meeting prep is knowing what the heck is going on, knowing how civics work, understanding the legislative session. So now I'm going to turn this over to Steve Vuleta, our special guest, who is going to talk about civics much better than I ever could.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Madeline, and thank you all for being here and for inviting the Secretary of State's Office of Secretary of State Civic Engagement Program to present. My name is Steve Vuleta. I am the Civic Engagement Program Manager, and our primary job is to basically make civics and civic engagement and get the resources out to anyone who wants to make their voice heard, and to ensure that everybody is able to exercise their constitutional rights, not just to vote, but to ensure that they have a voice in the way government works, because that's what we want in Washington. For anyone who's interested in kind of more what we're doing, I'm just dropping the URL in a chat right now. Feel free to ping over to it if you have a free minute, or afterwards if you want to save it in your bookmarks if you like. We have a special priority to reach out to underrepresented and historically marginalized populations, and as such, we have dedicated lines of effort for communities of color, the justice-affected populations, so people currently incarcerated or who have been released or have some history with the justice system, as well as just the rural population in general. And we're actually hiring a tribal engagement specialist. So apropos to some of the stuff you talked about in terms of land acknowledgement and native sovereignty, we also handle outreach to those communities as well. So I'll just say I'm a Puyallup native myself. So I grew up in Washington, grew up in Puyallup, Washington. My dad was in the Army, so he kind of settled up at JBLM. My wife is also from Puyallup, so we are definitely homegrown Washington kids. And I spent a stint in the military and then moved back to Washington State back in 2017, and have been loving it ever since. And I'll just go ahead and say that we're big fans personally of science, heritage, and the arts in our family. I was a musician in a past life, albeit not a very good one. It was fun though. And my daughter currently plays the violin. We're big fans of a lot of cultural institutions around the state, whether it's the Seattle Art Museum, the Seattle Aquarium, various other museums. We just went to the Pacific Northwest Ballet's annual production of the Nutcracker. So a lot of stuff you're talking about, it's kind of our jam. So we're big fans. I just want to kind of throw that out there and say that we're fans of a lot of the same things. Bearing in mind our time, I want to make sure that we're using it well here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through a what I would call a crash course in Civics 101. Right now, everybody should be seeing Civics 101 Primer, Inspire Washington on your screen. Is anyone not seeing that? Fantastic. Okay. So far, so good on the technology front. As Madeline and I were just discussing, sometimes that doesn't always go the way we would like it to. But already kind of gave an introduction, and so what we'll do here is share that. I want to start with an overview of the legislature. Now, a lot of you probably already know a lot of this stuff, so it will be a bit of a review. So I find one of the best ways to kind of educate folks about anything, at least in my case, is tell somebody what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you're telling them in detail, and then kind of tell them what you just told them again. So in other words, just repetition over and over and over. So some of this will be kind of a review if you've been involved in civics, in local politics, in state politics, have written to your representative or senator, have run for office in some cases maybe, and of course voting. So some of it's going to be a bit of a review, some of it's going to get kind of into the weeds, but we're going to kind of go over everything soup to nuts here, and I'll go ahead and take some questions, leave some time at the end for some questions as well. So to start off, we have 49 districts in the state of Washington. A significant number of those districts are concentrated kind of in the greater Puget Sound area, as you see, and I kind of try to zoom in a little bit here so you can kind of see what those districts are. If you live anywhere in here, you know that it's a really interesting to see how the boundaries kind of line up, because we can go over District 7, which is basically encompassing multiple counties, the entire Colville Reservation, and pretty much the entire central northeastern portion of Washington. And then you have any number of districts kind of just in this really small geographic area that has so many districts because it's populated. The key takeaway being there are 49 districts, and we'll get into this, but there is one senator per district for our legislature and 2 representatives. So people wonder, what is the Washington State Legislature? Well, much like the federal government, Washington State has 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Executive The most prominent example would be the governor, but also folks like my boss, Secretary of State Steve Hobbs, who is separately elected. He is part of the executive branch in a separately elected office. And you also have the legislature, which are your representatives from those 49 districts, and you have judicial, which is your court system. As I said, House of Representatives, you have 2 members per district for a total of 98. And they're elected to 2-year terms, elected in even years. The current split for the upcoming session is 59-39 in favor of Democrats over Republicans. And in the Senate, 1 member per district, 4-year terms, staggered so that you don't have a whole new Senate every couple of years. And currently it's 30-19 Democrats, Republicans. The legislative process is actually at a 2-year cycle. And that includes the budget, which we're going to get into a bit more specifically at the end here, because I know Madeline had mentioned that there were questions about how the budget is drafted in each house, how the governor drafts theirs, and how we kind of come to reconciliation when the budget is passed, and then how it's different in a supplemental year or a short session. Long session is what we had last year. So it's 105 calendar days, starts the second Monday in January through late April. And the job of the legislature, the primary job, is passing 3 balanced biennial budgets for the 2-year cycle, and then setting policy priorities for the next 2 years by introducing and debating new bills. So basically, the long session is kind of where a lot of the heavy lifting gets done.
Alexa, timer off.
We just came off a long session this past year, and we're about to go into a short session for the even year in 2026. Still starts on the second Monday, goes through early March, 60 calendar days. And generally, it's to take up any bills from previous years that have kind of more or less been sitting dead somewhere in the process. And we'll get into that process in detail shortly. They may introduce new bills, although generally not as many as long session years, and then pass a supplemental budget, which is really just adjustments to the budget they passed last year. Of note, the 68th Amendment to the Constitution, added in 1979, allows for a 30-day special session to be called. And that is usually budget related. If you've been following the news, which I think a lot of folks on this call probably do, being as engaged as you are, you know that the budget is, there's a lot of negotiations about kind of where the shortfalls are and how we're going to plug those gaps. And as such, that may be something that comes up. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. It hasn't happened in my time here, but that doesn't mean that it won't. We'll dive into this a little bit later, just after I've kind of shown you how the bill to law process works. But you can actually track bills on the legislative website, and you're actually able to comment on bills, sit in committees virtually. You can also attend them public hearing or public sessions on debates on bills in person as well while they're being discussed. And they are open to the public, and we'll get into that here in a second. And I'll take you through how to use this tool as well at the end of our presentation. So big picture, how does a bill really become a law? It's a long road, and I won't read every single thing here, but if you're old enough to remember Schoolhouse Rock, kind of like I am, they're talking about at the federal level. It's not really that different at the state level, at least in the state of Washington. So we're going to go ahead and dive in here to every step that a bill has to go through in order to become law in the state. First, I want to kind of highlight overall the summary of what we're going to be talking about, which is that, number one, a bill can be introduced in either chamber, in either house, either the House of Representatives or the Senate. It can be introduced in either one. In order for a bill to become a law, both houses must pass it with the same language. So just understand that even if the House passes a bill, then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate amends it, adds something to it, the Senate can't just pass that to the governor for a signature and call it law. The House is going to be like, well, hang on a second. We want to take a look at what you added first. And then they have to come to some sort of resolution on that. At the end of the day, the House and the Senate both pass basically the same bill with the same language. And then it can go to the governor for signature. Now, the governor can veto it. The governor can partial veto it, meaning take out certain sections of the bill. And we'll get into that a little bit. Or they can basically take no action, but the way it works in Washington is by taking no action, after 5 days, it's going to become law because the legislature has already passed it. The other caveat is that even if the governor vetoes it, a 2/3 majority in both houses can actually allow that bill to become a law, even if the governor does veto it. So backing all the way up to the very beginning, a bill must be introduced to the House by a member in a House of Representatives or a senator. You must have 3 readings of that bill in that house before it goes to a final vote within that chamber and then gets it passed, goes on to the second chamber. And in that first reading, what usually happens is it gets assigned to a committee. They have public meetings where folks are allowed to comment on the bill, and a committee report is generated if need be to essentially take in any amendments or take any commentary on board to make amendments based on the debate that happens in committee and based on the public hearings that you have. It then goes to Rules Committee where it's reviewed twice, and we'll dive into what those two reviews look like. And then you have your second and third reading. The second reading is when it's brought to the floor, and then there is a debate, and amendments can be made during the second reading as well. And then if those are approved, then the bill moves on to its third reading, which is essentially the reading before the members vote on it with all the amendments in that chamber included. Now, if it passes, bill moves to the other house. So if it passes out of the House, it moves to the Senate. If it passes out of the Senate, it moves to the House. Bill then goes through the same process above for the second house, and if amended, the bill must go back to the first house for approval, which I mentioned before. That part about the House passes it into the Senate says, hey, we like it, but we're going to add this. They can't just pass it to the governor. They have to send it back to the House, and the House has to look at what they added and say, we agree to it, or no, we don't agree to this. We need to sit down at the table and figure out what we can agree on. And that basically kind of sums up that right there. If there's disagreement on changes, you can ask for a conference committee. Members will try to come to an agreement, and houses come to agreement, then the conference committee reports generated, and both houses must then vote for that bill to pass. So that same language in both houses before it goes to the governor, where he may sign it or veto all or part of the bill. Once again, legislature may override with 2/3 majority. So how does the bill process start? Usually it's stakeholder input. Sometimes a legislator, either a House of Representatives member or a senator, has an idea for a bill, usually by taking input from either a public agency. For instance, the Office of Secretary of State may request a bill to change a law or to put a law on the books, and they may find somebody, they may discuss with various senators or members of the House of Representatives whether they will sponsor that bill for them. This also includes folks like, say, advocacy groups, 501c3s, anybody else who essentially is kind of in that representative's constituency who wants to get a law on the books. They can hopefully make their voice heard and then get that representative or senator to sponsor that legislation and get it into the hopper. Once again, once they have that member of the House or the Senate agrees to sponsor a bill to solve a problem, then the prime sponsor, who is the senator or member of the House of Representatives who is going to sponsor it, either sends a blue sheet for the House of Representatives or a pink sheet for the Senate. That officially starts the paperwork that says, okay, this bill we're going to start to make this policy recommendation, for lack of a better term, into a bill so that it can actually be brought into official business for the session. Now, this is very key because it's not actually officially going to be debated as a bill for potential passage until it goes to the code revisor's office and is assigned a bill number, excuse me. Those numbers actually have meaning, 1,000 to 3999 for the House and 5,000 to 7999 for the Senate. One of the items that Madeline has suggested we discuss is, how do bills die? Bills can die in many, many ways. They have a very precarious life in our legislature. And this is actually one of the first opportunities for it to essentially die, is that if it doesn't ever get delivered and doesn't ever get assigned a number, the bill's dead before it even arrives on the scene, so to speak. There may have been a lot of discussions, but until it's actually given a House bill or a Senate bill number and is brought up for that first reading via the code revisor's office, signing that number, then it's not actually considered a bill yet. So in theory, you could have a bill die before it even becomes a bill. That first reading, when it's introduced, and say we're in the House, I'm a member of the House of Representatives, Inspire Washington has asked me to sponsor a piece of legislation that affects cultural access programs. I agree. If I'm that member, I then go through all this process. I get the blue sheet, I sound a House bill number, House Bill 1001, and then I bring it to the floor of the House, and then we make the first reading. It's a bit of a misnomer because the first reading is kind of a procedural thing that basically introduces it into the session for official business. And they typically abbreviate the reading, usually like first line, last line, or something really quick. And there are no amendments on the first reading. The real business of this doesn't start until it's referred to committee. Now, who refers a bill to a committee? If I'm in the House, it's going to be the majority leader. If we're in the Senate, it's going to be a Senate floor leader. Now, different members with different levels of pull within either the party they're responsible for or the House the chamber that they reside in can obviously have some influence over that majority leader or floor leader. But at the end of the day, it's the leadership of the respective chamber that's going to decide that's going to be referred to a committee. And that committee is typically decided by kind of a discussion on, well, where does this bill reside? Which committee should it go to? We'll dive a little bit into the committees a little bit later because there's a lot involved with them. And but if something is, say, fiscally related, it's probably going to go to, say, Ways and Means, for example. If something is related to, say, law enforcement, it will probably go to State Government and Tribal Relations. If something is affecting government to government relations, so relations with those 29 federally recognized tribes or the other tribes are not federally recognized, but nonetheless part of the tribal residents within Washington, then it's going to go to State Government and Tribal Relations. So once the bill gets to committee, the committee staff, who are nonpartisan legislative staff, prepare a bill report. And then the committee chair, who leads the committee, that chairs the committee, will decide whether the bill will get a public hearing. Once again, the life of a bill is very precarious. In order for a bill to advance, it is required to have a public hearing. It is not optional, it is required to have it. And thus, if the committee chair, for whatever reason, decides, even when discussing with the committee, that we're not bringing it to a public hearing, okay, the bill is now dead. It was referred to committee and it just stayed there. It's not moving. Now, if the committee chair does refer it to a committee, which we're hoping it does in the case of the hypothetical bill we're discussing, then we have the public meetings. This is where sponsors, stakeholders, public at large can testify about the bill. Anybody can sign up to testify. I'll show you how to do that here when I take you through the legislative website at the end of my presentation. Some of you may have actually already done this. You can do virtual testimony too, which was kind of an we kind of proved that concept during the pandemic, and they realized that this is a good way to get folks who may not have access to Olympia to basically be able to make their voices heard within the committee. So anyone can sign up to testify. That's a good way to make your own position on a particular bill known, whether you're pro or con. And it's a good way to inform the committee's decision as to whether it will move on to the next step, which is executive session. Now, after the public meetings, the committee chair can decide whether the bill will move to executive session. Guess what? The committee chair decides not to move it to the executive session, the bill dies. So the bill just, hey, we had public meetings about it, we talked about it. For whatever reason, after discussion, the committee chair decides, no, this is not moving to executive session, then the bill is dead, unfortunately. If it is moved to executive session, the bill can be amended in that session, and then the final committee vote will be on the bill as amended. So the committee will vote on the bill with any amendments that were brought to that bill within that committee. So some people ask, well, are they voting on the original bill? Are they voting with as amended? Are they voting on some amendments? The bill is voted with the amendments inclusive. And of course, if it's not approved by the majority within the committee or in the executive session, then the bill is going to die. So if there are amendments added that change the opinions of certain committee members that were pro in one case, were now against, that can actually affect whether or not the bill is going to be voted in favor of. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind is that the bill may be, you may have a 5-person committee or a 5-person session that says 4-1, we're in favor, but there are amendments added. Now all of a sudden it's 2-3 because some of the amendments, some of the other committee members aren't so sure about it. Then in the executive session, it could actually die. If passed, the committee report is drafted and then the bill is sent to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee, we have essentially the gatekeeper of the Senate House floor. So before the bill is even brought to the floor, which was another question that Madeline included on the agenda, the Rules Committee actually has to rule on it. Now we have bills that are considered non-controversial bills. And you're like, Steve, what is a non-controversial bill? Well, it's a bill that people generally assume that this is going to pass and it's not something that's going to require debate. So it immediately goes to suspension calendar on the House with a consent calendar in the Senate. Now, the fun part, the bills that require debate, that goes to rules review in the House or rules white in the Senate. They call it rules white because the report's actually printed on white paper. That's where a lot of these colors are coming from. In keeping with those colors, the Senate is a very colorful legislative body. The House calls their second reading in the Rules Committee the rules consideration, whereas the Senate, being colorful, likes to call it rules green because guess what? The report is printed on green paper. Now, this is especially a dangerous time for the life of a bill because you just got through You got the code revisor's office, got you the number. You got to the first reading. You got to the committee. The committee voted in favor of you. You're moving on to the rules committee. Okay. The bill can die if, for whatever reason, it's not pulled from into the consideration green for that second reading. It can die if it's not pulled from that to the floor calendar, and it can die if the rules committee just says, no, we're not sending this to the floor. So basically, there's a lot of potential pitfalls for the bill there in the rules committee. Hence why the rules committee is essentially the gatekeeper, because this is kind of the last big stop before it actually gets to a floor debate in the Senate or the House. One important caveat: leadership can sometimes bypass rules to get a bill on the floor calendar. As far as I know, that in my time here, there's no official process for that. It really is kind of a relationships-driven business in terms of like how the leadership can negotiate with the rules committee to figure out a way to get on the floor calendar. So that's why, once again, it depends on party leadership. It depends on chamber leadership. It depends on whether or not just how much they want to get that bill up for a debate. So once it is on the floor, after all that, it's been assigned a number, it's gotten through the committee, it's gotten through the rules committee, out of executive session through the rules committee, through the second reading, it goes through the second reading on the floor, which the bill is read with all the committee amendments included from that committee meeting and executive session, and then debated on the floor in the House or Senate, whichever chamber that originated. It can be amended still during the second reading. So we already had amendments during committee. It can be amended again while it's being debated on the House or Senate floor. Now, when those amendments are added in, then there's generally an understanding that we're ready for a third reading. Then it will go to the third reading, which is essentially where we read the bill in order to ensure that it will either pass or fail in its original chamber. So once again, party leadership controls what happens on the floor, and they're rarely going to bring a bill up that does not have enough votes to pass. So this is where, if a bill comes in and we generally think it's going to pass for that second reading, but then a bunch of amendments are added, and then the party leadership decides, okay, now a lot of folks in our party are not in favor of this, and they may not even go up to that final reading for a vote, because they now know they don't have the votes to pass it. There are rarely surprises in this case. Once again, bill can die if it doesn't ever get to its second or third reading, if it never comes up for a vote, or of course, if it goes for that third reading and then it just doesn't pass that chamber, if the House or the Senate votes the bill down. So we got through the Code Revisor's office, got that bill through committee, got through the Rules Committee, got through the floor debate, the second reading. Added some amendments. The amendments were fine. So it went to the third reading. The House has now passed it. Whew, okay, we're done, right? Now, sorry, not even close. We're not even halfway there, actually. Because guess what? We're in the House. Now it needs to go through the entire same process again in the Senate. Pretty much exactly the same. Into committee, for debate, executive session. Amendments can be added. Goes to a second reading, goes to a third reading. Once again, that second reading, amendments can be added. And then if they add any amendments at any point, then it's got to go back to the House again and basically go through kind of the same similar process where we have to figure out how to make the bills match. If anyone is familiar kind of with the way won't get too far into it, but the way the federal budget has kind of been via continuing resolution, a lot of times you'll see House passes continuing resolution at the federal level. And everyone's like, yes, it passed. And don't cheer yet. The Senate now has to agree to it. But then the Senate adds something, and then it goes back to the House. But then the House decides they don't like it. Then it goes back. This can drag on for a very long time. And in many cases, a lot of bills end up dying because of this, policy related. One thing about the budget in Washington State is they're constitutionally required to actually have a budget. So in Washington State, there is going to be a budget bill, at least, if nothing else. With other policy matters, though, this is where a lot of issues actually end up dying, is because there's a lot of areas where there can be disagreement. In committee, second reading, when more amendments are added, going to a second chamber, more amendments are added, first chamber doesn't like it. Once again, can die in that second chamber. They just same as the original chamber. And then if both houses pass the bill with the same language, then it can be sent for the governor's signature. If they just can't come to an agreement, the bill can either die, or either house can ask for a conference committee and say, let's resolve our differences and get the language to be the same so we can get this to the governor. Both of us, both houses, we both agree that 80% of this bill is good. So let's iron out this last 20% so we can get the same language to the governor, get it signed, and get it into law. So if it goes to a conference committee, House passed it to the Senate. Senate added amendments. Amendments aren't necessarily liked by the folks in the House when they get the bill back. So they're saying, well, what do we do about this? Before it even gets to the conference committee, if it comes back to the House, for example, from the Senate, the House can either say, you know what, we actually like your amendments. And then it says like, oh, cool, bill passes then. Now it can go up for signature. Conversely, the House says, well, hang on, Senate. We don't like any of these amendments. We want the original bill we sent to you. And the Senate says, yeah, okay. The House can ask the Senate to recede. And that's when the Senate says, okay, that's fine. We can just take them out. That's called they've receded their amendments. And now the language is the same. So, hey, the bill passes. That doesn't happen as much as some folks would like it to happen, unfortunately. So what typically happens is you have a conference committee where both houses, either house can call for one, and then leadership appoints members of both houses to negotiate mutually acceptable language so that both the House and Senate versions are identical in their language. The committee can agree on the changes, and then they issue those changes in a conference report, and then both houses, once again, both houses must vote to adopt the conference report. Now, both houses approve that report, then the bill passes. We're done, right? Legislatively, we kind of are done. But there is one more important step. And once again, that bill can still die, either because the original chamber says, we don't concur with this, and we're just not going to call for a committee, and the Senate doesn't call for one, then the bill's dead. If the first chamber, the House, in this case, says, or the second chamber, the Senate in this case, says, we don't agree to recede our amendments, and then neither of them call for a conference committee, the bill dies. The conference committee can still be called, and then the conference committee just can't agree. They're at loggerheads, and they're at an impasse. So then the bill dies. Or either chamber conference committee adopts gets the conference report, sends it to both chamber. House says yes. Senate says no way, Jose. Okay, sorry, the bill's dead. Or it can go all the way to a vote, but then if one chamber votes it down, then the bill's dead. So once again, a lot of areas where the bill can actually fall through. This is why lawmaking can be a very it can be a very I don't want to say tiresome because that sounds negative, but it can be a very, very detailed process. In a way, it's set up on this purposely to make us basically negotiate with each other across the aisle and whatnot to ensure that we're actually acting in accordance for the most good for the most people when the system works as advertised. So back to my original point, we got through all of that, right? Both houses accept the conference report, same language, bill passes, done, not quite. Legislative branch is now done with it. Now it has to go to the executive branch, and the governor has to sign it into law. The governor can decide, however, to veto it. Now, if he signs it, the bill becomes law. Hey, great. The Secretary of State's office takes it, and then it's assigned into the RCW. The governor can veto it and say this is not going to become law, and the bill could die if it's not overridden by the legislature. The governor can also do a partial veto. Now, people are like, what's that? It's like, well, it means he can amend. Well, he can't amend. I'll be very clear. The governor cannot make amendments, but the governor can't strike out certain parts of the bill, certain sections of the bill. It's very specific that the governor can strike out a section and not a sentence or a word. The joke I like to make is say both houses pass a bill that says that, Washington State will not impede the sale of popsicles during the summertime. The governor can't decide, I'm going to cross out not. And now it says the state of Washington will impede the sale of popsicles. And so he can't do that. He can strike out a section of the bill that for whatever reason he feels is not commensurate with what Washingtonians want. And there's very specific method for him to do that. But he can't just strike out individual words and sentences and kind of make, do an amendment by omission, if you will. That's the governor cannot do that. During the regular session, governor has to take action within 5 days for bills passed, and 20 days for bills that are passed in the last 5 days of session. In case you're wondering why that is, believe it or not, a lot of the bills are kind of photo finishes for the session deadline. So the governor gets a huge influx of bills in that last week. And so the governor has a longer dwell time, if you will, to make sure that all those bills are given his attention in order to ensure that ensure that he understands what they mean before he decides to sign them or issue a complete or partial veto. Once again, the veto doesn't mean it's the end either. Veto can kill the bill, but the House and the Senate say, you know what, we all actually agree that this should happen. They can vote, as long as they get 2/3 majority in both houses, they can override that veto and it becomes law. Now, of course, if it dies, but doesn't become, if it doesn't get overridden, and the governor once again cannot amend. The governor cannot add something to the bill once it gets to his desk. He can make it the partial veto. He can strike out certain sections of it. Can't strike out individual words or phrases or a sentence, but certain sections, if he decides that a certain section or certain sections are not commensurate with what he believes is for the good of the state, then he can't strike that out. Once again, can be overridden by the legislature by 2/3 majority. Also, some people may ask, what about pocket vetoes? Well, the governor can't just take no action, expect the bill to not become law, because the bill will become law if the governor just does nothing. If the governor does nothing, then it's basically saying, okay, well, you're saying that you're not going to veto it, so it's going to become law. That's the way that the legislative process in Washington State is written. Once the bill does become law, it's assigned to my boss, Secretary of State Steve Hobbs, where it is assigned a session law chapter number and then incorporated into the law for the state. So there's a lot there, but I want to make sure we're being mindful of your time. I do want to get to a couple of demos here for how to use the legislative website. So I know folks are asking about the budget. Washington has a 2-year budget cycle, and the budgets are passed during odd years during a long session. So the budget cycle actually, the big negotiations about the budget were actually last session during the 2025 session. And so that's when they actually passed the budget that we're kind of looking at right now. During a short session, which is what we have in 2026, legislature debates and passes a supplemental budget, which fine tunes the existing budget. It's not a whole new budget itself. For everyone's awareness, the state fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th. It's kind of interesting because it's literally right in the smack in the middle of the calendar year. And so it's kind of hard to, you have to remember, okay, what's the fiscal year for the state? Oh wait, July 1st to June 30th. If you're familiar with the federal government, their fiscal year actually starts in October and goes to the end of September. For me, that's always been a little easier to remember. I have to actually think when I think, what's the state? Oh yeah, July 1st is the start of the fiscal year for the state. And for the 2026 short session, legislature, when they're doing that supplemental budget, they can consider supplemental appropriations, mid-year adjustments, emergency funding, but there is no new budget officially being produced during the short session. One question that came up that Madeline wanted me to address is, when do the proposed budgets actually come out? So for last year, we were debating when the budget for this biennium was brought up. The governor's proposed budget was released in early February. House and Senate proposed budgets came out late, just after that, and the final budget is usually approved by the end of the session. Last year, there was quite a bit of debate on it. There was the budget shortfall, something we're still looking at dealing with this year, seeing how to plug those gaps and make things work. So it's going to be interesting to see how the supplemental actually rolls out this year. Some folks may have questions as to where does all the money go, and this nice little eye chart is actually produced by Senate Committee Services, which is an organization that we've been able to take some media from. So if you're wondering kind of what are the big hitters in terms of the budget, K through 12 public school, HCA, DSHS, DCYF, debt payments. I'd just like to point out the Office of Secretary of State's over here, kind of looking like a little planetoid. We have just under the amount of funding that the Office of the Attorney General has, and so it's there's a lot that goes into the state budget. But people are kind of wondering where generally the big hitters are in the state budget. This is a good diagram to kind of visualize that. This whole presentation I sent to Madeline, and Madeline, please feel free to send out the PDF version to everybody on this as well, so they can kind of take a look at it and send any questions my way, because I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that come up. I do want to take some time to go through some items here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll end the presentation here. But I want to take you through kind of what some of these are, and I'll drop some of these in the chat hopefully here. Give me 1 second.
If you want, Steve, I can grab those from the presentation and drop them in the chat, so you can just focus on sharing them with everyone.
Yeah, that'll work. Looking at our time, but the so legislative.wa.gov site. If I go there, it'll actually bring up this site. And what you can actually do here, if you kind of follow where I'm going, you can actually look at different bills and whatnot. So let's say I want to look at House Bill 1017, which is a bill from the last session that is near and dear to my heart. It is designating Kimchi Day. I'm Korean, so this is near and dear to my heart. I grew up eating it. My mom cooked it all the time. You can actually track where the bill went and where the bill is going, and you can track this real time during the current session as well. What I will say about this is that this one unfortunately died in committee. So it's a good example of, like, you can see where the bill is at and where the bill has kind of died. And you can actually go to different, you can go to the original bill, and then I'll show you an example of a bill that actually passed, and you'll be able to see kind of where, how much more information is on that as well. If you're interested in knowing what the session is bringing up, the pre-filed bills link here actually shows you, like, on December, the first week of December is the earliest time that legislators can actually pre-file bills, meaning they can drop bills in for consideration that have already been assigned a number by the code revisor. And you can actually look through what's going to be debated up here and what's going to be possibly brought to the floor in the upcoming session. And you have everything addressing travel insurance, concerning dietitian licensure compact, protecting vulnerable users of public ways, addressing issuance of confidential identification, addressing higher education funding. This one's in the news, enacting an excise tax on large operating companies on the amount of payroll expenses above the minimum wage threshold. Basically, that income tax one from Representative Scott. This one's kind of been in the news. Maybe that's one you want to take a look at. But by all means, take a look at the pre-filed bills, because there's a lot of information in there, and there's probably some good stuff in there that you might want to take a look at to see if it's something that you're interested in or affects your organization. Going back to our legislative representatives, this link here, if I want to know who my representative is, let's say this is my address, type in your address, say find your district, and it will actually tell you not just who your state representatives are, but who your federal representatives are. Most folks know Senator Canwell and Senator Murray. You may or may not know your representatives, since there's a lot more of those. They will actually show you who your representative is. So if I want to see what Senator Wilson's up to, I can actually go to her website, go to her legislative page here. I can go to her website, go to her district page. I can email her. I can see what committee she's on, and these are all the committees that she's on. Quite a few. She's kind of an institution within the Senate. You can see her voting records by year. You can click on any one of these years and see her voting records, and you can see bill sponsorship and see which bills currently are pre-filed bills. I don't know if there's any they have any of those, but you can actually look at every single bill that she's ever pre-sponsored there. So that's kind of a cool little tool for folks who want to see the legislative representative and see what they're up to. If you want to know more,
Can I chime in real quick on that one?
sure thing.
Yeah, so if you are a district leader or you're just a really big overachiever of an advocate, I would highly recommend doing that for when you reach out to your lawmaker or you're preparing for your meeting with them, actually checking out their voting record to see which bills
Totally.
that pertain to the cultural sector they have voted in support or against. If it's against, at least you know, and then I would recommend don't bring it up during your meeting. But if they voted in support of things that have made an impact on you and your community, it's great to thank them. We think thanking lawmakers is one of the most important things that we can do to build these strong relationships. So obviously not a requirement, but if you have the time and you're curious, we highly recommend that you go through and do that so that you can give them a thank you, and that'll help you all the more.
Thank you, Madeline. Yes, anything you can be that can allow you to be a bit more civically engaged is helpful. I just clicked on the committee's link here. You can testify at a meeting, you can sign in to view the meeting, you can learn about the process, and these are all on the legislative website as well. A lot of the information I've given you is actually on the website, just a lot more detail, and you kind of got to go searching for it. I wanted to give you kind of a quick 1 hour primer on how everything works. And if you're familiar with TVW, I'm a huge fan of TVW. They got all kinds of educational videos on there as well. A lot of folks probably wonder, how do I testify at a meeting? And I've included both the link directly here, or you can just go to the committee's page that I had up, and you can say how to testify at a committee meeting. And you can actually sign up to testify here, and you can testify in person or remotely, and you can look at the session documents for any of the committees, and then you can find what the rules are for the House and the Senate. And you do have to sign up for an account. So I'll just kind of show you what this looks like here. This document tells you how to do that. If you're thinking about PII or whatever, maybe that's something to consider. I'm signed up for this because I like knowing what's going on with bills that and information on committees that I'm interested in. But you can actually get notifications about about these things as they're happening and kind of what the status of them all are. But yeah, you can also just go directly to the links here because I want to kind of make it shorthand. You can go right directly to that, and you can go right directly to the committee meeting on how to view a committee meeting. You can search which committee you want to go to on viewing committee, House, Senate, joint, or agency. Agency is like, say, the Office of Secretary of State, a separately elected executive. Or you can search by legislation, and you can search for the bill number. Right now, there's nothing in committee, so you're not going to really find anything because the session hasn't officially started yet. The session start date is January 12th. I want to make sure I mention that for folks who I know are fairly interested in knowing what's going on in session business. Lastly, I want to talk about a bill that might be near and dear to your heart. This is House Bill 1575 during the 23-24 biennium. And this one, unlike House Bill 1017, Kimchi Day, did pass. And this was on modifying the sales and use tax for cultural access programs by allowing the tax to be imposed by councilmatic or commission authority, defining timelines and priorities for actions. Essentially taking a 1/10% additional tax to be used, that revenue to be used to funding cultural access programs. You can actually view all the roll calls. You can see that it was a House bill with a House number. It was introduced in the House on January 25th, 2023. You can view the original bill. You can see the public hearing materials. And you can see every single thing we talked about in terms of the process here. The Rules Committee, Rules to review. In this case, Rules was suspended, so they apparently thought this was pretty important. It placed on the third reading immediately, passed with a 51-47 vote, then went to the Senate, and then it went through basically the same process there. Referred to Ways and Means, which is what the Senate Budget Committee is basically called, and then went to a second reading by Rules Committee, third reading, suspended, rules suspended, placed on the third reading, and then passed 27-22. Speaker signed it on April 14th. President of the Senate signed it on April 18th. So that passed out of legislature, delivered to the governor. Governor signed on 25th, and then became session law, subsequently effective July 23rd, 2023. And you can actually read the original bill and documents there. One thing I do want to highlight regarding the bills is you can actually go to different. If I go say to the current biennium, and I go to back to say 1017, which is dead in committee, unfortunately. This bill, in theory, could be resurrected during the supplemental during the short session. I want to call your attention to this stuff over here where my cursor is. You can send comments to your legislatures. You can sign up for email notifications. Once again, you do have to sign up for a account for that. But you can send a comment to your legislator. It will ask you, what's your address? It'll verify your district using that same district finder, and then you can actually comment directly to the legislators on that. I'm currently a member of a veterans organization. I was on the board for that organization for a long time, and so for veterans benefit bills, our board will often tell us, "Hey, this bill is in session, being debated right now. Here's the link. Comment to your legislators." And every single case, we were able to get that legislation passed. And we essentially flooded the legislators' inboxes with our comments and support and why we support it. Which is something that for particular bills that you're interested in, you can do. Let's see, going back here, I do want to leave some time for questions. I would love to dive more into each of these, but honestly, the best way to kind of look at these items here that we're seeing and kind of learn about them is just kind of poke around and just look at what's been done. One thing, you can actually search for bills by, you don't have to put the say the bill number as what you're looking for. I do want to highlight this because a lot of folks are like, well, Steve, that's great, but I don't know what bill number it actually is. Well, the good news is if you go to the bill tracker, once again, I just want to share, this will be the last thing I share here. I don't know the bill number. Okay. Well, the good thing is you can also search for by the House, search for by topic. By topic is very popular because it's easy. I can look at which biennium I want to go to. In this case, I want to go to the current biennium, and I want to search for, say, affordable housing, or I want to search for, say, law enforcement, or I want to search for, agriculture or something like that. And I can actually see which bills are being debated. Like if I say I want to search for something related to tribes and tribal members, for example, because in civic engagement, we do outreach to, one of our lines of effort is doing outreach to tribes and tribal members. I can actually click on that and search for any bills that pertain to tribal topics for the current biennium. And then I can look at all of these, and they'll give me a quick summary, and then you can actually click on these, and it'll take you to the respective bill and where it is. All right, I see we have 5 minutes left, and I do want to leave some time for questions and some time for Madeline to wrap up. I think I went a little bit over, so I apologize, but I'll stop sharing right now and open the floor to anybody who has any questions. And if you have any questions that aren't answered, feel free to reach out to Madeline or myself. I'll make sure that you all have my contact information, and I'm happy to answer anything that you have.
Thank you so much, Steve. Let's see if we have any questions here in the crowd. All right, I'm not seeing anything so far. Thank you all for being here. Also, just to piggyback off of your last point about committees searching by topic, so that you all know there is no like arts and culture topic on the legislative website. In my experience, and Jesse can always chime in if I'm forgetting one or I'm missing something, our bills usually will go through the finance committee because a lot of them are about giving more funding to the cultural sector in whatever way that looks like. So usually finance, arts education bills, you will usually go through whatever education committee. There are a couple different ones. And then, yeah, we'll have some others that are kind of random depending on where they go. So you might be like, why is that bill in that committee? But it's just to assign it to some sort of topic because there's not a cultural sector topic on that website.
And that's exactly why they have the leadership in the respective house. Basically, it's like sometimes there are things like we don't have, say, arts and culture as an example, but in the last case, for example, the taxes for cultural access program, it's like, well, that's a tax thing, so that's a finance committee can do it, and that's usually how that happens.
All right, any final questions from anyone? All right, well, in that case, we ended 3 minutes early, right on time. Thank you so much, Steve, for your wonderful presentation, for all this great information. For all of you, I will send you the PowerPoint. I will also send you the recording of this if you want to watch it back. We'll be posting it on YouTube. Feel free to send it to your fellow advocates on your team, people who you want to recruit for AHS Week. And before we go, I'm just going to make sure that I drop the information to sign up for AHS Week in the chat. If you have not already signed up, please do so. We would love to see you. And it's really important that you do sign up officially rather than just showing up. So make sure you get your information so that I can organize you, get you acquainted with your team and your district leaders so that you know what's up and you can stay on top of all the bills and things that we'll be tracking and learning about this year. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.